Welcome to the Blogger Genius Podcast, brought to you by Milo Tree. Here's your host, Jillian Leslie.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. For today's show, I have a really cool guy on the podcast. His name is Cole Schafer. He's a marketer, he's a copywriter, but this is really what drew me to him. On his website, it says, live fast, write often, pet dogs. I love this guy. We're going to talk about person-to-person connection, how to sell, how to get people interested in what you are doing, how to rise above the noise. So without further ado, here is my interview with Cole Schafer. Cole, welcome to the show. I am so glad you're here.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, you are a copywriter and you're funny and you're irreverent, and I really liked that when I was reading through your site. So could you share your brief entrepreneurial journey, how you got into this and where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated from the University of Southern Indiana a few years back with a degree in marketing. And I kind of did what most kids right out of college do. I went to work for someone else. And I was about a month into that job when I realized I'm just an absolutely terrible employee. And I don't mean that like in a positive way. I just wasn't a good employee.
Okay.
And I think I was making maybe $11 an hour to work at this really small advertising agency in my hometown. And I just hated it. I mean, literally like each day when I'd get up and go to work, I hated it. And it was kind of scary just because, I had just gone 4 years to school to learn marketing. And even though advertising and marketing aren't the exact same thing, they're about as similar as any two things can get. So I was a little scared, but what I realized, I started doing the math and I was like, okay, my employer is billing out customers at, $125 an hour. I'm sort of making this really low salary. If I leave this place and start doing this stuff on my own, I can charge a whole lot more. And so kind of the next day after that thought, I ended up quitting. And I went to work for a construction company in my hometown that was paying me cash. And it was a super flexible agreement where they would let me work from 8 a.m. in the morning to like 2. And during that time, I would go into these really, really nasty apartment buildings. And my job is to like tear out carpet and lay down new carpet. And so during that time, I was like allowed to work alone. So I'd listen to a ton of podcasts just on, Tim Ferriss's podcast and the Side Hustle School, and just all of these really amazing podcasts. And it felt, I always joke, but it kind of felt like I was getting my MBA because I literally listened to about 100 hours of podcasts like that summer as I was working that job. But as soon as I'd get off work from that job, I would go to a coffee shop, and the next 6 to 8 hours was spent building what today is Honey Copy.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it was this really, I kind of had a weird journey because I went to college and then I did sort of what everyone does, but fortunately I was able to quickly recognize that, this path of like working for someone else just isn't, it just wasn't for me, and for some people I think it's just fine, but it wasn't really my cup of tea.
And so then how did you get interested in copywriting? I mean, it looks like you are very passionate about this.
Yeah. So one thing I noticed while I was working at that agency is the things that kind of, I would say, set my soul on fire was when I was writing, right? And in college, I ran like a really small little blog that wasn't very successful, but I had always had a knack for writing. I loved reading. And I remember the night like I quit, I called my best friend up and was like, this is probably crazy, but I'm really thinking about trying to become a professional writer. And at the time I had no idea what copywriting was. And he was just like, oh, go do it. He just said, I think like you really can take a go at it. And so starting out, I had no idea what copywriting was. I was literally cold emailing startups and just saying, hey, if you're ever in need of some emails or blog posts, let me know, because I would love to write them for you. And it wasn't until probably about 3 or 4 months in that I realized, oh, what I'm doing is copywriting. And that's when I started training myself in what copywriting is. But I think that actually kind of offered me an edge sort of on the traditional copywriters, because I didn't really get into it from a copywriting standpoint. I just did it because I loved writing.
Now, what would you say copywriting is versus, say, writing?
Yeah, so I would say copywriting is selling things with words,
Okay.
at its
Yep.
most simplest form.
Yep.
It's just selling things with words. Regular writing is communicating ideas or telling stories with the written word. And so really the major difference between copywriting and regular writing is when I'm writing something, like let's say I decide to write a story, or Stephen King writes a novel, right?
Mm-hmm.
By the end of that novel, there's not really any set goal that Stephen King has for his readers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he wants to entertain them,
Right.
But there's no set goal. Whereas with copywriting, copywriting has very, very clear goals with everything you write. When you have a reader read what you're writing, you are trying to get them to do something, buy something, give you their email address, subscribe, whatever, share. So the main differences between the two is, like, with copywriting, you are trying to get someone to take an action, whereas with regular writing, you're not normally doing that.
Right. Now, is copywriting more about the word or about the psychology?
That's a great question. So I think that there's a little bit of a mix between the two. I think psychology plays a huge role, though, especially when we're talking sales copy.
Okay.
And we could talk all day about psychology and like psychological triggers that essentially get people to buy, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's dozens and dozens of them, but at their most basic core, I think anyone can become a competent copywriter, or write good copy as an entrepreneur, or a freelancer, or marketer, if they understand that the primary reason why people buy is to either move closer to pleasure or further away from pain. All purchases can be broken down into those two things. And now there's much deeper things, like people might buy for status and exclusivity and all that. Yeah, all of that. But at its most basic form,
right,
people buy to either move closer to pleasure or further away from pain. And one example I always give is like the worker, and so she just got a huge promotion, like a $20,000 promotion, calls her husband, is super excited. They're both excited. They want to celebrate. On her way home from work, she buys $100 bottle of wine, which is really like sort of an irrational purchase, because she doesn't know a ton about wine, but she's buying it. That purchase is a move closer to pleasure purchase.
Mm-hmm.
But in the morning, when they're really badly hungover and they have a really bad headache,
right,
and there's no Advil in the house,
right,
and they have to wake up and go find Advil, they would probably pay $20 for a bottle of Advil to move further away from pain.
And I've heard that people will spend more money to move away from pain than they will to move toward pleasure.
Yes, I would say that's fairly accurate. I mean, anytime, it's kind of like, let's say you're on a road trip to Florida,
okay,
and your car breaks down and someone quotes you just an insane amount of money to fix the radiator.
Right.
There's a good chance you're going to probably pay whatever they quote you, because you're in dire need of getting that thing fixed. Now, not all brands are. I think the really, really good products are the ones that are moving people both closer to pleasure and further away from pain. But most products are doing one or the other. They're usually not the same.
Now, if I though if I am, let's say, selling something like a course, do I want to focus on moving my customer toward the benefit, or to say you don't have to deal with this pain point anymore? Because we're always taught to look for the pain points, solve the pain points.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that when we look at like the most exciting products, I don't think that they usually market towards people's pain points. I think they really market towards moving people closer to pleasure. I mean,
Tesla.
Yeah, like Tesla, Apple. These companies aren't marketing to say like, we're trying to move you further away from pain. I think people get really, really excited about moving closer to pleasure. I think pain is more of that thing where, yeah, I'm glad I don't have to deal with that anymore, but you don't see people wearing Advil shirts. You know what I mean?
Right.
You do see people getting Harley Davidson tattoos though.
Right.
So I do think pleasure, I as an entrepreneur and marketer, I get a lot more excited about marketing towards pleasure than pain personally. So.
Okay. So then let's say I sell a product. How should I be thinking about moving somebody to pleasure, but not just the thing that I always struggle with is how to get somebody to take action. There's the power in the status quo, which is like an object at rest stays at rest. How do you get somebody to not only go, yeah, that's a good idea, but to actually either take out their credit card or put in their email address to actually do something in the world?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So I think one approach to marketing that I have always taken with Honey Copy is one, not ever trying to rush the purchase, but understanding that like the customer's decision to make the purchase really you plant that seed months and months and months before they actually make the purchase. So a lot of times with Honey Copy, and I have an email list that I send out a newsletter. It's called Sticky Notes, but I will randomly have someone reach out to me about doing a big project, and I'll look them up, and they might have been I might have been sending them an email for the past year, and they're just now reaching out about it. And for so long with marketing, I would always sort of I would always think like I have to get that sale today, right? And what that kind of caused, and I don't know if I'm sure you've heard of this terminology, but it's sales breath or commission breath, and that's the idea that like customers know when you're trying to shove the purchase down their throats, right? They can almost smell it on you, and so by taking more of the approach of, hey, we're just having this ongoing conversation, and I'm gonna be in your inbox once a week, every Monday, with a really, really thoughtful email or something really powerful to say, or even with your podcast, like you have 80 episodes right now. It's oftentimes, I think what you'll find is the people who are moving and actually buying your product, they might have listened to a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen different conversations that you've had before they actually decide to purchase. So to answer your question, I do think that psychology definitely plays a part in the copy that we're writing to ultimately sell the customer. But I think that job becomes tremendously easier when we are planting that seed early on and sort of giving the customer these really valuable nuggets for free, building that trust, building that rapport, building that brand with them, right? And then when it comes time to make the sale, you can say, hey, I built this really, really cool thing. I worked really hard on it. And because of that, I am charging for it. And I'd love for you to buy it. And if you can't, no worries. I'm still going to send you this free email.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you think that I'm building a relationship, I'm showing up, I'm honest, like you can get a sense of who I am. But then are there things that I should be doing to trigger people? Like, for example, hey, I'm running a special. Yeah. I'm running a sale. It's only going to be up for 48 hours. Go. Because otherwise it's so easy to go, well, next week there'll be another email. I could buy it next week, or
right,
whatever.
Exactly.
So what's your thought about that?
Yeah. And so I think to add to that, planting the seeds is a huge aspect, but like with Honey Copy, one thing I'll do to my newsletter is like probably once a quarter, twice a year, I'll run what's a flash sale, right? Where I'll drop my, I'll add a discount to my copywriting course, like maybe a 25% discount, and it'll only be available for 48 hours or 72 hours, right?
Right.
And sense of urgency is a huge thing, and it's some people view it as manipulative, but it's just the truth. I'm telling people, hey, I'm only gonna let this be 25% off for the next 48 hours. If you buy it now, like you'll get it 25% off. But if you don't, like you'll just have to buy it at full price. So I do think that some of those psychological triggers can definitely come into play in those situations.
Okay.
One thing that is huge and I noticed I was creeping on Milo Tree's copy because I'm obviously a copywriter. And one thing I really liked was...
Wait, when were you there? Because we just updated the copy.
Today.
Oh, good. Okay.
But one thing you guys do beautifully that's super, super smart is you have the copy: join 7,743 happy customers who have added over 23 million social media followers and email subscribers using the Milo Tree smart pop-ups. So there's sort of a psychological trigger in human minds, and that's actually called herding, right? And how that works is like we will sort of follow the crowd,
right?
And it's not manipulative, but it's just true. It's how we work. Like in ancient warfare, for example, one of the biggest things that generals would have to struggle with in war was keeping their soldiers from running.
Yes,
that's kind of like the idea
yes.
of like
Yes.
They'll shoot them in the back, which I don't want to get into that because that's morbid. But the idea is like if one soldier runs, then 2 and 3. And when you get to like a dozen soldiers making a run for it, that will cause this sort of primal trigger in our minds of, well, we all have to run, right?
Right.
But I think that same thing can be channeled positively for like really good products that might have a massive impact on someone's life, where when we see, okay, 7,743 people have bought Milo Tree and are using it, and they've collectively gained 23 million social media followers. That is the same effect in my mind. Like it's like herding. We're herding towards that product, and of course it establishes trust and all that too.
Right.
But that's where I think like psychology can really come into play with just like the words we're using.
Oh, good. I'm glad you noticed that. We just changed that. So I'm glad you noticed it. And I know, for example, for me, I go to Amazon and I read reviews and I kind of go, okay, well, this person's probably like me. And if they like the product, chances are I'll like the product. And I know that some of those reviews on Amazon can be fake, but in general, you kind of get a gist of what it's like. And if other people are doing it, you know what? I'll do it too, because I don't have the time or the energy to like buy this product and try it out, and who knows. And so I'm willing to do what the herd is doing, or the tribe.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I was just looking at credit cards for travel, because I fly quite a bit, and was just looking for the ones that have the best perks for miles and whatnot. And that was what I looked at, was just what people are using, what are the reviews on them. And yeah, I think if we as marketers are doing it, there's a very, very good chance that our customers are doing it too.
Hey, are you a blogger or entrepreneur who loves their business but is a little overwhelmed with all that you have to do in a day? Well, you are not alone. We all feel this way. So I want to share a pop-up tool that will increase your social media followers, grow your email list, build your traffic, and it is called Milo Tree. Milo Tree is a pop-up app that my husband David built for our first site, Catch My Party. In the 4 years that we've been using the Milo Tree pop-up on Catch My Party, our Pinterest account has grown exponentially to over 1.1 million followers. And our Instagram has grown to over 160,000 followers. And these social networks now drive millions of page views to our site every single month. Milo Tree works to grow followers on Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. It'll grow your sales on Shopify or Etsy, and it will even grow your email list. You can focus on growing one platform at a time, or switch between several, the choice is yours. MiloTree. It's easy to install. You can do it in under 3 minutes. It's completely optimized. Right now, you can get your first 30 days for free. Just go to milotree.com to sign up for your free trial. If you are not converting your site visitors into followers, subscribers, and customers, you need to change your strategy. To take the first step, head over to milotree.com and start your free trial. There's no risk, and you'll be joining thousands of other professional bloggers who are already using MiloTree to grow their businesses. As a bonus, once you sign up, I'll send you valuable business tips each week to help you continue to accelerate your growth. You can't be everywhere all the time, so let MiloTree work for you. It's fast, it's easy, and it gets results. So what are you waiting for? Head to milotree.com and start your free trial. Okay, so you have this concept that you should market. You don't want to market as a brand. You want to market as a human. Can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing we have lost, in my opinion, in the sort of the internet, the age of internet, is the human to human connection that was once upon a time sales and marketing, right? Like my great great grandfather and my great grandfather were both blacksmiths, right? And so when they would do and they had like a little shop in Francisco, Indiana, and when they would do a deal with someone, right, the person would show up in front of them and they'd talk it out and they'd talk about the project they were wanting to do, and it would be this handshake, and it was this very sort of intimate human interaction, right? Because back then, like if you're paying a blacksmith, $400 or $500 to create some type of machinery for your farm, right? That's not a small purchase. Like that's a huge purchase. So once upon a time before internet, all of our sales, all buying and selling was done like this. It was done face to face. And I think as we sort of entered into the age of the internet, and even before then, where you had sort of mass advertising, like where commercials and people were brands were making a ton of money selling literally like sugar cereal in a box, right? By just advertising via television, we sort of lost track of marketing to the individual. I mean, one of the biggest things you hear in marketing is target market, women between the ages of 25 and 35. Well, that's such a ridiculous idea, because a man or a woman who's 25 years old has nothing in common with someone who is 30 or 35 or 40, right? So one thing I recommend to brands is don't market as a brand, market as a human towards another human. And the way you do that is I would literally recommend whoever is one of your best customers, pay to fly them in, jump on a call with them.
I say that. Do the stuff that doesn't scale just to learn.
Exactly. And just have a conversation with them. If you have to, write 1,000-word article on them that you read before you shell out any of your marketing material. And so one thing that really famous writers will do, like Stephen King, he writes all of his novels to his wife, who's also a really great novelist. But the reason he does that is he recommends all writers to have their what he calls an ideal reader, right? The one person they're writing to.
Right.
And naturally, as humans, we have a lot in common. And when we are marketing with just one person in mind, other people can relate to that, because we get more specific, we get warmer, and so that's why I just say market as a human, don't market as a brand, because when you sort of are casting this wide marketing net, it doesn't resonate with anyone.
Right.
No one can feel it.
Somebody I interviewed said that when she writes her newsletters for her list, she writes them to her mom.
I love that.
And that if her mom then calls her up and says, "I really liked your newsletter," A, it's not salesy, even if she's selling something. And B, like her mom would be like, "I didn't know this week that you blah, blah, blah." It's like newsy and breezy. And so that's who she thinks about for her audience, because it's kind of like your girlfriend down the street or whomever that you're just chatting with.
Oh no, yeah, you're exactly right, and I think that's awesome that she does that because it just feels it adds such a warmer tone to your marketing, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, you talk about this thing called a hook sentence, and I can tell that you love to read because you collect them, it looks like.
Yes, yeah, I collect them for
Can you
sure.
explain what that means and also how marketers can use them?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so a hook sentence in the world of literature is the the first sentence that you read when you open a novel, right? In depending on what industry you're in, it has sort of different definitions. Like in traditional academia, it's the hook sentence in an essay tells the reader what they're about to read. But in the world of literature, I think the hook sentence is the most powerful because as an author, when you're asking a reader to spend days, right, reading your 180,000 word book, you're asking them to commit an immense amount of time and energy to read what you've written. That's a really big ask. So authors, in my opinion, have one of the hardest jobs in the world, and that's just to get people to keep on reading. So a lot of times the best writing takes place in literature, and that's why I don't recommend a ton of business reading to people who are wanting to write better, because most business writing isn't very good.
It's really boring.
It's really boring. It's not good. So anyways, I collect a lot of the first sentences in some of my favorite books, or just like books that are known for having just iconic first sentences. And the reason I do that is it helps me just think about how can I write an amazing first sentence that gets my reader to read the second sentence and the third sentence and the fourth sentence. Because that's really the biggest challenge is a lot of times we have like this 7-second window to grab the reader's attention, right? And what happens is you'll notice a lot of articles, they might have like 30 or 40 word sentences as their opening sentence. And people just aren't reading all the way through that.
Right.
So you need to come up with something that's short, punchy, 5 to 10 words at max, and that just pulls the reader in, you know? And there's so many great examples of these.
Do you have one that you could share?
Oh, absolutely. Let me pull some of my favorites up.
Okay, and are these first lines from novels, or are these first lines from sales pages, or what?
So the ones I'm about to share with you are the ones from just a few from novels, right?
Okay, got it.
But and I'll kind of elaborate more on this, but I lost my arm on my last trip home, right? That was the first sentence of Kindred by Octavia Butler. A screaming comes across the sky. That's the first sentence of Gravity's Rainbow. It was love at first sight. That was the first sentence of Catch-22.
Right.
I'm pretty much fucked. That was the first sentence of Martian, which you should look into that. That's like an amazing story behind the writer who actually wrote that. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure to burn. First sentence of Fahrenheit 451. All this happened more or less. That was the first sentence of Slaughterhouse 5. So and I have 61 of these, so I'm not going to go through all of them. But what's beautiful about those is that each sentence I read is under 10 words, right?
Ooh, interesting.
But they're extremely powerful, right? And what I love about the hook sentence is everything from the headline you write on your sales pages to the title you give your blog posts to the subject lines that you put in your emails, all of these are hook sentences, right? So it's kind of all encompassing. And I would even argue that at the most basic form of copywriting, if you can learn to write one really, really, really strong sentence, you can become a very capable copywriter. So the hooks.
Okay, so I was going to say, so let's talk about it in terms of some of your favorite ways to do this, do a creative hook sentence that's short and to the point that gets people intrigued for businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let me pull something up really quickly. Okay, so so first and foremost, like one of my biggest pieces of advice on like hook sentences, and again, headline, subject line, all that, is a lot of times like when we're writing a piece, right? We might spend 5 hours on writing an article.
Right.
And then once we're done writing that article, we might spend 30 seconds putting together some boring headline, and then we'll hit publish, right? Yep. And that's sort of like this narcissism that anyone who writes shares, and that's the idea that since I put time and effort into this piece, people are going to want to read it. Yeah. And that's ridiculous. And so one piece of advice I give everyone that will immediately make their hook sentences better is sort of this 20-80 rule, where if you're going to spend 5 hours writing an article or an email, one of those hours needs to be spent writing your hook sentence.
Wow.
Or your, and how I do that is I would just literally recommend writing down 25 of the best headlines you can.
Yep.
And then if you have colleagues, show it to them, or you can show it to your spouse, you can show it to your friends, whomever, and just ask them, say, read through these and just circle the 3 that stood out to you, right? Mm-hmm. And step back to the page in an hour, look at it, and you'll even be able to see, okay, these 3 are the really, really, really strong ones. And what's fascinating is this was like BuzzFeed, for example. They make every single one of their writers write 25 headlines before they publish an article. And they've seen like an increase in click-through rates by 50%, 100%, and in some cases like 500%. So a lot of times it really comes down to just putting forth more effort.
Yep.
But with that said, there are some very clear strategies like you can use to improve your hook sentences. So one of the first ones I give is this idea of like kind of like sort of like flirting, right? And this type of headline is sort of like the attractive girl or guy at the bar that is a great flirt, right? So she or he walks into a bar, they smile, they pass around compliments, everyone gets a taste but never a feel. They're sort of like this flirt, right?
Yep.
And it makes folks want them more.
Yep.
So a headline that flirts with your audience can be a good headline just because it sort of like, and how we do this is we highlight a problem to the reader and then we kind of hint at having a solution. So this might be, can't seem to make money in the stock market to save your life, read this. Another great way to write a headline or a subject line that gets attention is also kind of like the short sentences I wrote or I shared at the beginning, just cutting right to the chase. One article I wrote that went viral was something called The Psychology of Selling. That was the title I used. And that it might not sound exciting, but it ended up getting, I'm going to say like 30,000 applause like on Medium. And it was just because I kind of told the people who were reading it exactly what they were going to read. And so an example of this might just be, easy foolproof strategies to increase your chances of making money in the stock market. Just telling people like straight up, this is what you're about to read. And then of course there's ones that sort of play on that sense of urgency, like the quick, fast, and in a hurry. So let's say you work in a field where like maybe you're selling a product to people who are on a time crunch. One headline you could use is, in 5 minutes we'll teach you blah, blah, blah. Right. But yeah, I think that a lot of times with like hook sentences and really headline subject lines, it really just comes down to putting more thought into it, being a little more clever and writing out 25 of them and then choosing the best one. Because if people don't like the headline, they're not going to open the article, so.
Right. And I think that I liked your point about the fact that there is a kind of self-centeredness or kind of belief that like, well, I wrote all this and I spent all this time. You must know that. And therefore you're going to really like what I'm offering you. And that you have to go, oh, no. Though they could just scroll right by this like you scroll right by a million things. And there are probably things in your inbox that you've never opened that could have added a lot of value to your life. But for whatever reason, it didn't catch your attention and you never got into it. Yeah,
no, you're exactly right. And we just forget that it's easy as a writer to not realize the reader wasn't in the room watching you write that entire piece. Like they don't know how good it is. So you better come up with a really amazing headline that'll get them to want to read it, you know?
I
So,
like that. I definitely feel like I could use more time focusing on that. It's just I finish the piece and I'm like, oh, thank God that's over with. And then I go, all right, let's come up with something, something.
yeah,
that,
let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to cross this off my list
Right, exactly.
instead of really stopping and putting that kind of energy into it. I think that that's really valuable. Okay, let's say that just quickly is like one of my last questions for you. I want to sell something. I don't know what I should be selling. What would you say to me?
Gotcha. Great question. Okay, so I'm going to speak on this one. I'm going to speak more from like my own perspective because I started sort of offering a service, and that was writing, right?
Yep.
So if you're an entrepreneur or a freelancer offering some type of service-based business, one thing I always recommend to these type of people is to create what I call like is a hybrid, and that's half service, half product, right?
Okay.
Where you are, one thing I ran into early on as a freelancer was I realized, okay, I really want to scale Honey Copy. But to scale a service business, you either have to, one, hire more writers, right?
Yep.
Or B, raise your rates.
Right. Or C, never sleep.
Yeah, or C, like never sleep, right? Yeah. And I think I used one, so A, B, or C. So A, what I said was I don't want to hire new writers because I really like writing. I don't like managing other writers. So I like nixed A. That's not an option. C, like I need to sleep. But then B, I realized, okay, I can raise my rates and make more money. But eventually you sort of hit this ceiling, right? Where you can't like charge people $5,000 for an article. So what I realized was I have to come up with some type of product I can sell that feels natural with the service I offer, but that I don't have to trade minutes for dollars on it. Yep. And so for me, a ton of what I do for companies is just helping them sell whatever they're selling with words, whether that's catchy emails or really in-depth articles that teach people something specific like to their industry, right? And so what I decided was, well, as I'm raising my rates, not all these startups are going to be able to afford, a $5,000 project with me, but I still really, really want to help these startups. And so why can't I teach them on obviously like not the same level, but why can't I teach them how to write copy themselves? And so I created my copywriting guide for just $97. So it's literally a fraction of the cost that I would charge them to work with me directly. And while no, I'm not promising that they'll get the same exact results as they would get by working with me, this is still a really, really great option. Right. And so what I would recommend to people who are trying to come up with a product to sell, I think it's tremendously valuable to start out selling some type of service and then coupling a product with that service. So when it came time to write my copywriting guide, I didn't even ask my audience. I just knew it was going to work because it's like I've been making a living doing this stuff for the past 2 years. I know people are going to buy this guide.
Especially who are on your email list.
Yeah, especially who are on my email list.
Who want to know about copywriting.
Yeah, and so I think a lot of times where maybe people mess up with like creating a product is they might try to create a product that is entirely different from the product they're already selling or the service they're already selling. And I think instead people need to sort of look at it as like a tiered pricing model where, all right, you can buy my $97 guide or you can buy my $500 copy audit, or you can work with me for, $2,500 to build out an email sequence. So sort of doing tiered pricing and making that lowest tier your product.
Right. I think that's really smart. It's kind of like, like a brand extension. And recognizing that, if you are a brand, if you're Coke, you could come out with Diet Coke, and people go, oh, that makes sense. But if Coke all of a sudden starts selling sneakers, you're like, yeah, that doesn't feel right to me. I don't really think of Coke as a sneaker company.
Yeah. Oh no, you're exactly right. It would make that would make no sense. It would feel weird.
Weird, right?
Yeah.
So I like that idea of trying to figure out who you are and then moving incrementally in a direction where you can find a new revenue stream.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's how I would recommend going about building out.
I love that. So Cole, how can people reach out to you, learn about your course, connect with you? Like, where are you available?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am, I'm always open to people like just sending me an email, and that's just cole@honeycopy.com. I try to respond to every email I get. And as far as like, if they want to buy my copywriting guide, they're obviously more than welcome to. They can just go to honeycopy.com, and in the right-hand corner, there's it just says copywriting guide. They can click on that and it'll take them. But, I'm not necessarily trying to sell anyone on that. Like, if you want to just get my weekly newsletter, which I think is sort of the most exciting thing I have going on right now.
Right.
And it's completely free and it's super, super valuable.
And by the way, that's how I found you. I landed up on your website. I joined your list. I started getting your emails and I reached out to you and said, hey, would you be on my show?
Yeah, I know. I love that. And that newsletter has just been wonderful, but it's called Sticky Notes, and it's just honeycopy.com/sticky notes. And that's all one word. So that's how they can join the email list. So.
Well, Cole, I have to say, I've learned a lot. I'm going to spend more time on my headlines. Just, I have to write something after I get off with you, and I'm going to put a little more effort in there. So thank you for that tip, just even for today. And really, it has been such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Oh, it's been wonderful. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
I hope you learned from this episode. I hope there were real takeaways for you. And if you have suggestions for me, whether it be topics, guests, that kind of thing, please reach out to me at jillian@milotree.com. I love hearing from you. And I will be here again next week.